My name is Jana Kryline. I am one of the founding members of Club dVIN, and I am joined tonight by two more of our founding members, Valentina Littman and Anne Krebiehl. So I will let both of you introduce yourselves. Valentina, you want to go ahead?
Okay, so hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you ladies. We were saying that we love talking between the three, so we've tried to focus on the topic. And I was born in Buenos Aires, so Argentina. I started my professional life as a chef, which later opened me the horizon to this beautiful world of wine. I've been working in service and management in the fine dining industry as head sommelier of Martin Berzategui, which is a 3 Michelin star chef restaurant, and in the Basque Country in San Sebastian. And then I continued my journey back to Buenos Aires in the Palacio Duo, Park Hyatt. And later I came back to Europe again, and I achieved my WSET diploma last year together with Jana, both in the UK, and I won the award of the Sommelier of the Basque Country in 2018 when I was living there. And right now, the most important thing is I'm fulfilling my dream of learning the art of winemaking at Recaredos Winery in San Sadurní d'Anoia, and also making my own wines here. But most of all, today, I'm very honored to say I'm founding member of and head of community of Club dVIN, having the chance to be talking with these two wonderful women.
That's right. And Anne, please introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Anne Krebiehl. I'm a wine writer and have been a wine writer for the past 12, 14 years, but I've written about food before. And I'm also a master of wine, became a master of wine in 2014. At the moment, I am editing a magazine called Falstaff International, which is keeping me super busy. But yes, I was born in Germany and stayed there for quite a while. And then I lived in the States, briefly in Italy as well. And then I came to London to go to university. And I've been here ever since, even though I've been traveling. I've worked vintage in New Zealand, in Germany, in Italy. And I'd love to do that again, if I ever can get away from my desk again. And yes, it's like having a lovely evening with my friends Valentina and Jana, even though we want to talk about a rather serious subject tonight.
That's right, we do. So I will just introduce myself very briefly and then we'll get into it. So as I said, my name is Jana Kryline. A lot of people in the wine world know me by my social media alias, which is The Wine Girl, very creative. And that is an account that I actually started after moving from Canada to Germany, where I'm now based here in Dusseldorf. So I moved to Germany because I had started my sommelier education in Toronto. And I worked in restaurants for 8 to 10 years and just fell in love with wine. My parents also collected wine since I can remember. And so that I think those two things together just set off a spark. And I was reading and learning and working in restaurants. And I just thought, you know what, in Toronto, it's just not the same thing. So I decided to move to Europe and try and get a foot in the door in the wine industry. I did that by emailing every winery in the city where my long distance boyfriend at the time lived, emailed every winery. And the one that answered me was the one I was the most interested in, a biodynamic winery called Weingut am Stein, where I worked for 3 or 4 years, actually. Started by doing harvest. And then they opened up the doors to me and I learned everything from vineyard work to cellar work to sales. And then I became the export manager for them, which was very interesting. And all the while, running an Instagram account that I still have today, and that has opened so many doors for me in the wine industry. And I'm very thankful for that. So I've had the opportunity to travel all over the world and do some storytelling for industry brands. I also filmed a little television show with Aldo Som, who is one of the world's top sommeliers. In 2008, he was the world's best sommelier. And now I found my way to Club dVIN. Very, very thankful for that. I'm the head of content. And it has been such a journey getting into NFTs and seeing how that connects with wine. Because after all, Club dVIN is an NFT wine club. You can find out all kinds about that on our website, clubdvin.com. So if you are interested in learning about the club, go for it. We definitely encourage you to find out more and ask us any questions you may have. But as Anne has said, tonight is actually a very wine topic, and that is climate change and how that impacts wine growing worldwide. So I would say, actually, rather than doing the little intro on Club dVIN now, Valentina, how about we get right into the topic? And yeah, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah. Okay. So we were wondering ourselves, we met yesterday with Jana and we tried to think the most optimum questions that we are all thinking and we feel that are very important to understand. And it's like, if we would ask you, and like, do you think warming temperatures are changing the wine map? So do you think we're going to see, of course, classic wine styles from classic regions change due to global warming?
Is this a question, or is it two questions? So I think definitely the wine world is shifting, and definitely the classic styles are changing. And this, I think the first time it really hit home for many people was the 2018 vintage, say with Burgundy and England. And so definitely the wine world has changed immensely, especially in the past 30 years due to climate change. And I think there are winners and there are losers of that. But this is such a big topic because, of course, people talk about global warming, but global warming is one aspect of climate change, because there's also the warming of the soil temperatures. Then there are extreme weather events, hailstorms, floods, late spring frosts that people had almost forgotten about. And so extreme weather events, shortened growing seasons. For some people, we now have vineyards in Denmark, even in Norway. I live in London, and we now have a thriving wine industry, which is down to climate change. I was in York not so long ago, and there's a vineyard up there, And so, yes, everything is changed. Everything is changed. And, it's funny that many of us living the way we do are quite insulated from the reality, because we have electricity, we have warm and cold water, we have heating, we have aircon, blah, blah. So in a way, we have a year-round supply of food. I can buy strawberries in December or asparagus in December. So many people just don't necessarily render themselves quite conscious of what it means. But if you think you're in the wine industry or in farming, where people have kept records of flowering date, the harvest date, the way the year evolved, you can see a real shift. And agriculture is at the forefront of this. And viticulture is probably, the sexiest and most glamorous part of farming. And so, because so many column images are spent talking about fine wines in particular, we think, okay, this is where it becomes apparent, and where this piece of farming rears its head. And if you think last year, the flooding of the Our Valley, devastating floods, like biblical. And then you had only 2 weeks ago, you had hailstones as big as my fist in Bordeaux. So all of these things are happening, and somehow trying to be a farmer amidst all of this is a huge challenge.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting if you talk about kind of opportunities. A huge part of the climate change discussion, let's say most of the climate change discussion is very, very negative. But as you said, there are also some opportunities. For example, the thriving industry in the UK. I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada. We also have thriving sparkling wine production now. Still, you know, there's, of course, spring is a little risky, and it's always going to be that way for sure. But I think it's really interesting if you talk about classic regions, for example, Bordeaux or Champagne. You know, I wrote my thesis on climate change for my WSET diploma and how it affects the wine industry. And it was really like, there were so many resources about the new Bordeaux varieties that they're putting into place, you know, where they're things that wine regions or winemakers can do to mitigate the changes. But what I found was the most interesting about Bordeaux was actually reading that the quality of Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc is increasing and is predicted to continue to increase until up to 2050 with the way temperatures are rising right now. But for Sauvignon Blanc, for example, or Merlot, they're already in several vineyards outside of their optimum ripening areas, right? So that's a huge part of Bordeaux. Do you think that that's already evident to, let's say, the general consumer when they're thinking about Bordeaux and tasting Bordeaux from recent vintages? Or do you think that the winemakers are like quick enough to adapt, and how so?
I don't think that it's necessarily plain to your everyday consumer who just loves wine and drinks wine. And it's this thing about Merlot is evident. But then we know that Merlot is suited to certain places where Cabernet isn't. But isn't it a saving grace that Cabernet is there and Cab Franc is there? And also, you know, Petit Verdot will also deal rather well with the climate change. But when you say this in about Merlot, I had a very interesting conversation with the president of Colgan Vineyards, and he's a Texan, and I will not attempt to do a Texan accent because I can't, but it was very, very, very funny when he said, Merlot loves water like a kid loves candy. So also in hillside vineyards in Napa Valley, is it absolutely clear which grapes can take the heat and which can't? And one of the things that is also a positive, just yet another aspect of this, is if you think that if you go back to the 1970s and 80s, that was the great pioneering time for the new wine regions in the New World. You know, when Casablanca Valley in Chile was discovered, etc., etc., etc. And everybody who was ambitious and wanted to make wine that was going to be taken seriously in the world planted Cabernet or Merlot or Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. And we see this in Australia happening right now. And also, sorry, my brain is a little bit fried, sorry. But definitely in Australia and in California, that now people are actually looking beyond these grape varieties. And you have, for instance, grape varieties from the Douro Valley, indigenous varieties like Touriga Franca, Touriga Nacional, that might actually really be able to deal with much hotter climate, drier soils, hotter soils, even places that are far-flung, that have hitherto just clung to Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir. And also Ibn Sadi from Sadi Family Vineyards is road testing numerous varieties, you know, indigenous varieties from the south of France, from the south of Spain, just to find out where he can go with that and what will work in these new circumstances. Because I think we have really gone through quite a change of awareness in the past decade, where I remember still 15 years ago reading many, many, many things about, you know, climate change skepticism. I think that has subsided because the chickens have come home to roost. And also, if you think like 30 years ago in Australia, in the Riverina, well, you just irrigated and you had your water rights and you just had the water and you did it. If somebody starts a new project today, they will not think like that. They will start planning their vineyard with a very different mindset, just because we all now know what a scarce resource water is. And the other thing is, there are so many frontiers for this. Oh, sorry, this subject is just too vast. Another very fascinating thing is that, yes, we talk about clones, we talk about varieties, etc., etc. We know that grape varieties, most of them are grafted onto rootstocks. Rootstock research stopped at some point in the middle of the 20th century. And who is creating new rootstocks with reduced vigor, much reduced water necessity, etc., etc. So there are frontiers where research is necessary, which is not yet necessarily being done yet, or I'm actually not up to date. Perhaps somebody's already working on this, but the entire continental European classic wine industry, as it turned out in the 20th century, when, you know, it in the 1930s came the first appellation contrôlée, etc., etc. And if you think of the 20th century as a kind of a time when finally humans could farm and win against nature, because until then, until the 20th century, nature had the upper hand. It still has, but at least, you know, there were means of humans of securing harvests, etc., etc. All of the 20th century, in pretty much most regions of Europe, it was a struggle to ripen grapes. So in Bordeaux, it was a struggle to ripen grapes. In Burgundy, it was a struggle. In Champagne, it was a struggle. Yeah. In all of Germany, it was a struggle. In Germany, every degree of excellence was fetishized. And so you see that most of the research that was done and most of the study that was done was all done around the one endeavor, which was to ripen grapes.
Yeah.
And now I think it has completely changed, and people talk about preserving freshness. People talk very differently about soil from the way they used to 20 years ago. I think we're actually at an incredibly interesting time as well. And, you know, then there is a camp that says, oh, the only future are fungus resistant varieties or blah, blah. Which is something that fills me personally with dread. But I heard Laurent Delaunay speak, who is the current president of the BIVB, the Burgundy Wine Board, and he said how much research is being done, even in Burgundy, and you know how it's a very collaborative effort, but he said he's absolutely certain that Pinot Noir and Chardonnay will be part of the future of Burgundy, which made me so happy to hear, because anybody who's been anywhere on this world knows that Pinot thrives in the Russian River, which is quite a bit hotter than Burgundy today. We know that Chardonnay is an incredible chameleon when it comes to, you know, climatic expression. So I think we're living in a very, very, very interesting period, and it's important to step back and look at what we know for what it is. And for a lot of what we know is entirely informed by the thinking of the 20th century and this struggle to ripen grapes.
Absolutely. And for what do you think, like for the highest quality wines, which are the three most important conditions you think must be met?
I would think soil conditions. So healthy soil, enough water, just enough. Little bit of struggle is always good. I don't know what are the three conditions. It's like a good vintage, a good soil with enough water availability, and expert care, of course, and somebody who knows a site and who is sensitive. But I think in fine wine, that is a given today. I think it's a total given.
Yeah. Oh, I think just going back a little bit again, I think this conversation that you had about Burgundy and how it's like, okay, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay will still be a part of the future in Burgundy. Just hearing that as if it's an option that they couldn't be or that they might not be one day, it's just like crazy. And it just makes me think, you know, we're talking about now planting Portuguese grapes in Bordeaux. You know, Champagne is looking at introducing new grapes, or have they already? I also am not up to date on that, but you have these really traditional classic regions that are changing so much about what will be the style of the wine, right? So it's like the last line in my thesis was like, can Burgundy still be Burgundy in 30 years? And that's what I want to ask you.
Well, I can't answer that, but I also have to say there is this thing where, you know, people who were alive when they had a memory of pre-phylloxera wines might have said that, oh, grafted wines just don't taste. And we have no time machines to go back and verify that. And even if we get our hands on a wine that is old enough to have been, you know, from pre-phylloxera vines, or, you know, what are we tasting? Is the age? Is there really a fair comparison? And if you, for instance, my big wine bookshelf is actually downstairs, but it's very, very, very wholesome and instructive always. Also to go back in order to get some perspective, and you don't have to go back that far. Anthony Hansen's book on Burgundy that he wrote for the Faber and Faber Wine Library in the early 1980s is eye-opening. You know, chaptalization. Like, you don't have to chaptalize anymore. Now you have to buy acid. And yes, so in 30 years' time, I don't want to think of how bloody old I will be, but, well, I hopefully will still be enjoying Pinot Noir. And I know that I personally like the tender, high acid, translucent Pinots. Perhaps they will all grow in England by then, even though, by the same token, I've tasted Pinot Noir from Essex, from the Crouch Valley. You would never think that this was England. And right. Tasting some of the 2021 Emprimeurs from Burgundy, I also thought, California, am I in the Russian River now? What is it? So things shift. And I think especially for Pinot Noir, if you think how long it has been with us humans, it has evolved alongside us. The viticulture has evolved alongside us. And so I just think wine will always be with us for that reason. But I think there will be winners and losers.
Yeah, and typicity has already changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about other areas in the world that haven't been planted yet.
Oh, yes.
Maybe moving into high potential growing zones. Which others would you think? Like, well, we have Bhutan as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just to like interrupt for 1 second, anybody watching, we brought up Bhutan because we're actually, Club dVIN is doing the inaugural harvest in Bhutan next year. We're doing a harvest event for 100 of our members. And there are now vineyards planted in Bhutan. And we're going to go and make history and harvest those vineyards together. Actually, not even sure. Do you know what grapes are planted there, Valentina?
No, I don't actually.
Okay. Well, this is just
think that we have conventional grapes planted there. I think that they are probably or there. I'm not sure. We will know about all of this in a very soon webinar that we will have together with Michael Jurgens, the director of the winery there, and he will give us much more information about that new word.
Yeah, but that's just an interesting topic. So Valentina, sorry to kind of interrupt your question, but yeah, if we're planting vines in Bhutan, what's next?
Yeah.
What do you think, Anne?
Well, it's funny. Yesterday, I had to be somewhere. So while I was on the tube, I had the time to read an essay by one of my favorite wine colleagues, John Atkinson, MW, and he actually consults for a winery that made this super ripe Pinot in the Crouch Valley in Essex. And he wrote this beautiful essay about clay. And he said his final sentence was that somewhere between Epping, Burnham, and I can't remember, there lies our Petrus. And so I just think, yes. And there was also at the International Cool Climate Wine Symposium in Brighton, that was about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a soil scientist who had mapped England. And so he saw huge potential. And this is just something that I happened to encounter and know. But then if you look at the vast, vast expanse of China, and if you look at the altitudes available there, if you look at the soils, I mean, and then there's truly the sensibility is there because of tea and because of, you know, like,
right.
I just think there is a brave new world out there of new vineyards, you know?
Yeah.
100%. New generations, people that are merging not only between the wine industry, but searching for geologists, for all kind of knowledge from many different industries that are joining to research and outcome new areas that were unthinkable in the past. Look at, well, we can name so many examples, but in Argentina, so as the years go by, we're getting higher and higher in southern and southern. So I don't know, we're gonna get to the Antarctic. And I hope that in a very, very long time, because that would mean that the climate change was very quick. But yeah, it's incredible. And yeah, it's at the same time, I think they're very, very curious, but we need to take care so that at least we try that the changes are not that sudden, you know?
Yeah. Just makes me think though, after completing my diploma with you, Valentina, and thinking about, we had one unit that was Wines of the World, and Anne, you know, Wines of the World was such a beast of an exam. And I'm just thinking, the more we expand and create new wine regions, these poor students that are upcoming, oh my goodness.
I think that very, very often. I think that so often, because it's just, how do you get your head around? And then things are becoming ever more pixelated as well, because, you know, the single vineyard movement, the movement to delineate stuff and to classify vineyards according to what criteria, or also, you know, is there reclassification necessary, for instance, in Burgundy?
Right.
And so those are really like so many cans of worms. Where do you begin? But for new students, I do not envy them at all. I do not envy them, because it's just crazy.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, back on topic. So what can we do then? I think we really want to respect your time, Anne, because I know you've got a ton of work to do. So I think to wrap up the conversation, something that I'm very, very curious about, and Valentina and I talked about this yesterday, I think it's worth discussing what we can do as an industry and what people are doing already to help protect wine, but also just help, oh, my husband ordered food, in case you heard the doorbell. What can we do as an industry to help not only protect wine and the future of wine, but just, you know, as a major part of the agricultural industry? What do you think we can be doing?
Well, I think it's a huge question. And if we really look at the dangers of climate change and we look at wine, I think wine is a luxury problem to have. Food security for the world, quality of life for the poorest, because, you know, whatever happens in Africa will absolutely affect everything that happens in Europe. And these are just geopolitical problems, and I really do not have the answers. But I also know that a lot has already changed. You know, here in London, we have the ultra low emission zone, and it's going to be expanded. And there are ways of flying and traveling, of propelling boats that is not fossil fuel based. I am also very heartened, and I don't know if I've said this before, but I am very heartened by the fact that Greta Thunberg's generation is now old enough to vote. And because, of course, good intentions and, you know, what can we do apart from sort of recycling our whatever and not using plastic and turning off the heating and not wasting resources, blah. All of that is fine and dandy, but the big decisions need to be made collectively, and they need to be made by governments. And, you know, if you think in Germany, there is to encourage people to ride, to use public transport. There's super cheap monthly ticket available to ride on the rail. Fabulous. Yeah. Other governments can only dream of that, you know? So it's a kind of, you hear how, of course, it's an entirely political question and it affects us all.
Okay, so let's narrow it down maybe a little bit then and say, what can a consumer do? So of course, you know, you can always look for wines that are bio or organic or sustainable, you know, but beyond that, is there anything that you think the consumer can do?
Pay attention to it and demand it from the producer. And then I've just seen at the London Wine Fair, actually really good wine packaged in bag-in-box.
Yeah.
So, and you keep that in your fridge and it actually lasts for 60 days. If you can be disciplined enough, not to drink it all. But I think lighter bottles, not falling for stupid bottle weight, making do without capsules. Because when was the last time a wine weevil ate through your cork? I don't know. But so it's about packaging, because packaging is a huge part of the economic footprint. It's about alternative packaging. It is about making do without super heavy bottles, without sort of gift boxes. And yeah, it might also be, I know, again, I'm bringing up an example from Germany. They used to have, ever since I was alive, and they still do have, bottles that are being recycled all the time. These are mineral water bottles. They all look the same and they're standardized, and whatever mineral water company sort of put their little label on. And why don't we do this for wine?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I worked in export, I actually saw that from a different perspective. But a lot of the so like the Canadian monopolies, for example, they were putting out tenders, and it was kind of like incentivizing producers basically to use lighter weight bottles. Or the bag-in-box thing was a big thing that Norway picked up. Where I remember taking that to one of my bosses. He was like, bag-in-box are good Riesling, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's working in Scandinavia. So yeah, I think that kind of thing, to incentivize the producer, you know, to welcome them into new markets and everything like that, is also very powerful. So decisions that are made higher up. Yeah.
And the more the students, the more people that study, the more communication that the wineries do to the consumers, which are already doing a big job. I think that nowadays there's much more people interested in drinking wine and enjoying wine, which with much more education. I think that that's going to bring a lot of consciousness to people. The idea of people going to visit wineries or just getting to Netflix and seeing documentaries, and lots of new students wanting to enter into the wine world, they are able to understand what vineyard managements of wine production can be implemented. And those are big impact decisions that can also change. I think that the consciousness of the consumer working together as a community with a producer, of course.
And I just think we also have this huge discussion about, plant-based stuff. And farming is just so interesting because you need animals in order to have manure, in order to have rich soil. So perhaps there also needs to be a kind of switch in, like, perhaps not a meatless future, but a high quality meat future, because those animals, actually the manure is gold, you know. I think this is such a vast and all-encompassing topic. It's like impossible to get your head around, but I'm also very optimistic, because the way we farm is a way of capturing carbon. There is a lot that can be done, but then it needs to be done on a larger scale. And that can only happen when people vote. And that'll probably take a little bit more time, but hey, you know.
I think, yeah, we're all heading to the same objective for most of us, and the percentage of people that are not are getting actually very, very low. So I think that there's a consciousness worldwide, not us as the wine industry being representative about this topic, but at the same time, so many industries are thinking the same way. So we should be positive, but very, very awake and try to, think different implementations to make this happen. I mean, I could name so many examples that we've been working on the vineyards this year, and it's fantastic to see really the results, very positive results. So
I think for me, it's important to know that there are solutions out there, that it's not doom and gloom.
Yeah.
That's always important, because I think there are days when I just think, oh my God. And it's important not to despair, because, there is a reversal of thinking of not chasing that ripeness, but protecting from sun, conserving water. I think we're entering a very interesting phase also with regenerative agriculture, and with understanding of the scientific understanding of what happens in the soil has increased so much. And really, every year, new people are turning 18 who will be able to vote.
Yeah.
And we're living in such interesting times that I hope they are not apathetic, but will actually make use of their right to vote.
Yes, indeed. I think that wine drinkers are creatures of habit. So they happily quaff wines made from lesser grown grape varieties that are suitable to hotter climates. I think that they should stop thinking only about the classic varieties or the only regions that they have in mind, and experiment new varieties, new regions, give the chance to I think that reconsider the business model of the typical wine producer, and so to better to varieties that are specific to each place, resulting in, of course, better quality wines and more environmentally sustainable, using less water. And I think that we will all feel a little bit less frustrated for most wineries that are trying to focus on fixing and manipulating grapes that are already planted, rather than replanting with grapes that are simply better suited. I think that would help a lot.
Yeah,
I think so too. And I want to be positive, and I want to be upbeat about this, because otherwise we can't exist if you don't have optimism.
No, and wine is still a very happy business. So I think we're very fortunate to work in the industry, and I think being positive is the best thing we can do. And just as Valentina said, awake about things. So
cooperation, and every person can do more than they already do. I think that's a good message.
Absolutely. Okay, on that note, I will wrap it up. Thank you both so much for your time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to definitely check us out on social media, send us some DMs. We'd love it if you follow us on our channels anyway. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And this will be up on our website in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Lovely to see you.
Bye.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks,
Bye.
Anne.